I know my soul. I plucked my soul out of its secret place and held it to the mirror of my eye to see it like a star against the sky, a twitching body quivering in space, a spark of passion shining on my face. And I explored it to determine why this awful key to my infinity conspires to rob me of sweet joy and grace. And if the sign may not be fully read, if I can comprehend but not control, I need not gloom my days with futile dread, because I see a part and not the whole. Contemplating the strange, I'm comforted by this narcotic thought. I know my soul. This poem written by Mr. Claude McKay back in the 1800s, early 1900s is when he lived. Listen, this is Anne Marie, host of About This Life podcast. This podcast is about taking a look at the stories, at the struggles, at the suffering that we go through and being able to let go of things so we can embrace a mindset, so we can make change, so we can thrive. I am so happy, so privileged to have this author with me today. I am truly blessed. So I have with me Dr. Efua Prince. Hey.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm well, thank you. I'm well and appreciate once again just to say thank you. You and I met at a fair, at a festival, and you were out there with your books. And I said, I have got to talk to this woman as somebody who loves books. So let me go ahead and properly introduce you. Okay. Afua is a professor of African American Studies at Wayne State University, and you specialize in themes of home, women, and housework. Basically, the foundation of the family. That's what I'm reading into this: home, women, and housework. You you have served as previously served as W.E.B. Du Bois Fellow at Harvard University, a visiting scholar at the Carter G. Woodson Institute, University of Virginia, an Avalon professor of humanities at Hampton University. Now, we won't say about other HU. we,
Well, we don't have to tussle about that, do we?
we won't tussle. Because of course I'm Howard. So Howard and Hampton, we are on a conversation getting along together. Your first book, Burning Down the House, Home in African American Literature, was recognized by academia as a university press bestseller. Dr. Afua, welcome to About This Life.
Thank you for having me, Anne Marie. I feel blessed to be here.
Oh, thank you so much. And we invite the Holy Spirit to join us and to guide us in the conversation as well, because we want to definitely recognize the ancestors and understand that we're here to make an impact. I want to begin with kin, K-I-N. I want to begin with kin. What gave you the inspiration for kin? And I'm asking you that question because I've read much of it, and there's some literary devices that you go back and forth, but I'm jumping ahead of myself. What gave you the inspiration?
Well, quite honestly, I wasn't intending to write Ken. Ken kind of came about because I was writing bits and pieces for different things. I've been working on a larger project that's about housework that I've been working on for probably, well, since 2017. I started writing that project. And so
Mhm.
that's this long-term project, but in between these other moments kept like insisting and inserting and just appearing. And then
Mhm.
a couple of summers ago, one of my colleagues, she called me and she's like, "Don't you have something?" And I was like, "I think I might."
Okay.
Right. And so I kind of pulled it together from all of these little pieces that some of them have been published here, there, but I was seeing it as a whole, as a kind of whole. And when she asked the question, it just gave me an opportunity to see if it was what I thought it might be. And so that's how Ken came into being.
So you've given us some insight in terms of a writer that it's not always that we sit down in a sit-in or a series of sit-in and we pump out a book or a novel, that we have short bits and pieces that come to us, that speak to us every now and then. So that's hope for the writers out there that's thinking about writing your book. And we can see Ken described by both poetry, prose, and prayer, all of it mixed in, but not just any kind of poetry, dialect. So, why don't we start with your main story first? Okay, what is Kin about? And then let's get into why go back to Gene Tumor? Why go back to Paul Laurence Dunbar?
Mhm,
Okay, so
mhm.
what is Kin about?
Well, Ken is about family and it's about the struggle, the challenges across generations. And really, it's about how it's a question. How do we love? And
Mhm.
that is like multi-layered. Like, how do we love, particularly on the other side of trauma? And sometimes we, especially as African Americans, have had to confront some really challenging historical circumstances. And sometimes we act out of those places of hurt against other people, we
Yeah.
people. And the question is, how do you love on the other side of that?
So, are you looking at how do we love as a form of from a healed place after we've been through some of those experiences of trauma? Or how do we love because we are in trauma? Where do you lean towards?
Well, that's the layers, right? What does
Mhm.
love look like? I rarely meet a person who doesn't imagine themselves as loving in some way.
Hmm.
It doesn't
Hmm.
matter what they're doing. They would tell you that they love, right? And that their actions
Yes.
are loving.
Yes.
And perhaps they are, and perhaps they aren't, or maybe that's not even for us to decide. So I think love is active and
Mm.
complicated.
Mm. It's interesting to me because I was talking about love recently. Uh, it happens to be my word. I will be in the equivalent of a beauty pageant at an upcoming gala, and you know how we wear sashes. So love is my word, and I was thinking, love seems like such a simple word, and yet it's so complex as you described. And you, in your storytelling, use dialect and you reach way back yonder to pull out the greats. Gene Toomer, Pearl Lawrence Dunbar. And it's because we went to HBCUs, we know those names. Why was it important for you to bring that dialect into conversation with the more modern, up-to-date prose that you write with?
Well, tones matter.
Hmm.
Tones matter. And sometimes what we use is like standard English, which I'm not sure I accept that
That construct, yes.
as a construct. We speak the way we speak, and language is alive, it's dynamic. And when I'm sitting down among my family, among my friends, I speak in different ways, given different perspectives, different things I'm trying to convey. And sometimes the tone has to shift in order for you to
Mhm.
understand what is being said. And so I play, well, that's one reason, but in Ken in particular, I'm playing because I don't ascribe to genre. So there is one piece in there that is nonfiction, and everything else is me playing around. Some maybe a little fiction,
Mhm.
a little bit nonfiction, a little poetic, a little bit of play, like a theater. Um,
Yes.
and so I play around with those things. And when I wanted to be very clear in indicating this one is nonfiction. That one piece right at the heart of the story is nonfiction. This is me as a woman stepping into the book, in the heart of the book, me speaking with my voice. But then the rest of it is me as a writer trying to convey some truths, whether it be through fiction or nonfiction. I don't really care. I just need the truth to be told in a way that the reader can
Yes.
understand. So dialect gives me a way to do that. I can just like I can pull it in, I can use the tones, I can change the meaning, I can play with form, I can play with facts. I can do a whole bunch of things when I'm shifting the dialect.
Yes, and I can say to you, certainly we understand when like mama calls you by your full government name. There's a tone in that versus when they call you by your nickname. You know.
Yeah, I have heard my name pronounced with every syllable enunciated. Then I know I'm in trouble.
We
What
know
did I
that
do?
tone. And we can inflect all the drama. Something that you said in your response just now is also a point that you write about in the foreword of your book. And I'm looking at the sentence here is I reject genre as a delimitation. You're making a point that you don't want to be typecast in a genre. Why is that so important to you that you not stay within that lane?
Well, I can illustrate. I'm sorry you brought in a storyteller, so she tells stories. So I apologize.
Yeah, I
That
do.
that long-winded answer, perhaps, but right in the middle of the story, there is this newspaper article that I found when I was looking for some family history in the archives at University of Georgia. So I was there
Hmm.
looking because someone had told me that my great uncle had been killed, and I was trying to find an article to see if it had made the news. And in looking, I found this story of a lynching.
Mm.
And so that's a historical nonfiction document, but it's absolutely ludicrous on the face of it. Ever since then, I would print it out and just give it to my students without comment. And then I'd just have them read it and then I'd let them comment because
Mhm.
you can't take it seriously. It's not written in a way that makes a 21st century ear accept any words that they're saying. It just makes no
No
sense.
sense.
But that's nonfiction. That was what was given to our community as reality. And it's not just given to our community, given to everybody
Mhm.
as reality. And so if this nonfiction is clearly fiction, then how do we get to the truth? So the truth is somewhere else. It's not in the historical document. And so you then can imagine what actually must have happened. So in Ken, I
Yeah.
presented first in a nonfiction essay, the newspaper article. Then the same exact story appears again in a fiction, in a short,
Hmm.
except in this one, I'm like, this is nonfiction and it's historical, but it's not true. This is fiction. It is not, yeah, it's fiction. It's not presenting itself as fact, but I'm telling you the truth.
It's the lived experience. It,
Hmm. 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 That makes you,
yes,
I mean, if you have a community of people,
yes.
you know these people, you know how they are, you know how they be, right? You know who they are, and you know that this not, newspaper is not telling you anything about the people you know. So then you have to find another way to speak the truth of their experiences.
And also, isn't it interesting that sometimes we have to speak the truth and we're not always able to say it in a direct way
Correct. So
because we have,
you can make up the story and you can tell the story and it's not
yes.
direct. You're not implementing somebody because you're like, I mean, I did. I just made that story up. I did make it up, but I made it up understanding the people I was depicting.
Who tells the narrative is quite important and essential. And we've been saying that for years. How do your students take the dialect? How do the students take your weaving your stories and navigating those waters? Um, what do they have a reaction to the dialect, for example? You obviously have a love and a passion for it. You have a point to be made with it. How do the students receive it? Do they see the significance of what it is that you do?
I think in terms of dialect, initially it's a little bit jarring for some students.
Hmm.
But once they see there's an established pattern and once they get with the pattern, it usually
Right.
kind of goes away. And a lot of people talk now, there's a lot of discussion about African American English vernacular and code switching. Sometimes they will bring that into the conversation. Sometimes they identify with it themselves because they're like, okay, in this place I speak this way, in this place I speak that way.
Hmm.
But mostly what happens is once they get with the story, it starts to drop off. It
Right.
starts to disappear for them, for their ears. They don't really begin to, they notice it initially, and then after a while they get the pattern, and then it kind of becomes more invisible to them.
I find that literature is much like rhythm. And even in teaching of Shakespeare and iambic pentameter, at first, middle school students think it's strange what they're experiencing. But I said it's a lyrical quality. And if you can pick up the rhythm of it, then you can understand what's being said. That's the gist of it. That's part of it. And so I'm hearing from you, it's important to understand what comes from the African American culture. And we need to appreciate that. So my next question, um, I'm looking at my cheat notes here and being honest with that because I can't read that fast anymore. Um, how does your work address the whole idea of making a social impact as we move forward? So we looked back and we looked at what you brought into your stories and the mixture that goes with that. What do you hope might be a social change or impact? What impact do you want to make with your novels?
Well, you started us off with the poem from Claude McKay. And it began with the phrase, I know my soul. And then it ended somewhere toward the end, it said again, I know my soul.
Yes.
And I think that is what Ken is about. You know, it's about knowing my soul. And
Mm.
so for me writing, and I was just having this conversation with a couple of people this week. My
Hmm.
co-author for another book I published last year. I had two come out last year. That co-author and I have been having an ongoing conversation for a long time about why are we writing? Because sometimes it feels
It's isolation and like
Why am I doing this? And then when you look around in the world, so much is going on. It's like, does it have an impact? What has changed? I mean, did we and he tends toward liberation and reading and writing for pragmatic liberatory purposes. I think for
Mhm,
me, it's closer to what Claude McKay is getting at. It's about first and foremost trying to understand something about myself, but
mhm,
not in a confessional or a kind of trying to be an exhibitionist. I don't need to be on display. I'm writing because there's something about the human experience as I am living it that can
mhm,
connect with other human beings and that we create community um, in some meaningful ways, even in the midst of perhaps a country trying to go back 100 years to the dark ages or whatever they're
I
doing.
want to say 300 before 1776.
They're trying to go somewhere. They're trying to drag us back. But writing to me is like it resists that. It resists it. And then writing is like a way for us to hear and understand experiences outside of ourselves. That's what another colleague of mine who happened to be my professor at the HIU.
Mhm.
And she's now a dear friend of mine. She's the godmother of my youngest child. She's known me since I was 17 years old. And so we are like growing old together now. And so we were talking, and she was saying, because I was like, I mean, these are the kind of conversations I have with my friends. And I was like, what
Yes.
am I doing? Why am I still doing? And then we started talking about how writing helps people find empathy, not just empathy, but understanding of
Mhm.
experiences outside of yourself. Things I have not done. When I read, I get to understand because that medium communicates. And so that to me is what I hope my writing does is it communicates and it offers people an opportunity to see something that may not be directly parallel one to one, but
Mhm.
it connects on another human level so that the whoever is thinking, my thinking, their thinking expands.
Absolutely. And it sounds to me like writing helps you understand yourself and your place in the community, whatever your community might be, is what I hear you saying, to a large degree. With that being said, what are some of your other books? What are some things that you've written besides Kin? Go
Yeah, I should have grabbed them. I think I actually have them over here.
ahead.
Here, I got stacks and stacks of books I got to dig through. I have at least two.
Every English professor does.
I've got stacks of books we're in my home office here. So this is one came out last year
Okay, I
in
like the title already.
2024. Yeah, crazy as hell. This one is the one I co-authored, and we call it the best little guide to Black history.
Mm-hmm.
And so that one's kind of it takes the Black history, takes it on in a kind of broad lens, not trying to be comprehensive, but
Mm-hmm.
to tell it in the way that we tell it to each other when we're sitting around the kitchen table. Um, and we find even in the pain ways to laugh. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and we kind of point to resources. We're not trying to be too heavy-handed, and we're not trying to tell you everything, but we're trying to say this is the way we see our history. This is the way we think. So we like put people into archetypal categories. And so that was that's my most recent. This one, and then of course I got my other book here, Ken. These
Ken,
out last year.
I've got it too. Hey.
That image on the cover, that's my daughter's artwork on the cover.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. Awesome sauce.
Yeah.
Okay. But you said this was your fourth book, so we
That's
have
the
two.
fourth. Yeah,
So
so
what's the
okay,
other
so this was
two?
my first book, the one you mentioned, Burning Down the House. And this is an academic book where I'm thinking about some canonical texts like Toni Morrison's Song of Solomon and
Hmm.
The Bluest Eye, or Sue. I think I might talk about all three of those. Um, I look at Native Son by Richard Wright and Ralph
Yes.
Ellenson's Invisible Man and Gail Jones's Corregidor. I look at the way home is configured in those novels.
Okay. One of the things that I find interesting because you've just rattled off the names of books that I'm familiar with, The Bluest Eye, Sula, and knowing who these authors and these novels about, yet our young people don't know them. They don't know them. And it becomes, how do we, especially since our books are stripped away from schools, how do we pass this down from one generation to the next? Um, I guess my question is asking, how do we keep storytelling alive, whether or not somebody published a book? Because, there are people that I teach that don't know who Toni Morrison is. And I'm like, oh, okay. I'm gonna
There are
sit here and
people
wait.
that I teach that don't know who Toni Morrison is.
No.
Um, Yeah, it's a hard question. I mean, we were laughing
Mhm.
a few days ago. My son was over, everybody was gathered, and I'm a Toni Morrison scholar, so she's one of my areas of
Okay.
specialty. So everybody in my family knows this, right? And so somebody asked my son, he said, "Well, you read Beloved, your mother is a Toni Morrison scholar." He and I looked at him and he looked at me and we laughed and he started telling some lie because this is the thing. He was my student. He got a Black Studies minor when I at the university I was teaching at.
Yes,
And he was
yes.
in my class and I assigned Beloved. And he didn't read. I know he didn't read it because I was his teacher. So it's a tricky thing. Even
Yes.
in your own family, how do you pass the knowledge on? And I think
Hmm.
the way that we have to do it is we have to, well, it's great if you can start young. So for me, I have one granddaughter. I'm already, she's sitting in my lap, we're reading.
Yes.
I mean, another way that I do it with my family is audiobooks. When we get in the car,
Hmm.
I turn on stories. And so if we got a road trip, we're listening to stories.
Okay.
And so that's another way that's actually pretty effective because you got, especially if you're going like to Georgia or to Michigan or to wherever you're going on a long road trip,
Hmm.
you got time. What are you going to do? You might as well listen to a story. And I started my kids off very young with that. So they kind of expect it's like when we like packing up, you got your sunblock, you got your bathing suit, you got your
Yes.
tennis shoes, you got your audiobook, what we got, it's all part
What we
of
gonna listen to?
what we're going to listen to. And I think those are good ways. But the other piece is just being deliberate and and
Hmm.
reading. And I mean, there couldn't be you talked about stories. One year, the day after Christmas, I mean, excuse me, the day after Thanksgiving, I
Hmm.
gathered everybody and I pulled out my video camera and I was the elders and the children, everybody in between, and we were just telling stories. We were asking the elders questions.
Right.
We're just sharing and sharing and sharing out of whatever happened. And after a while, they weren't thinking about a camera, but I was preserving it for the kids. And the kids were getting to know things that they did not know about when they moved from the South up north and what,
Hmm.
what kind of jobs they got and what happened in school in the South and what happened in school when they moved and all of these different things. Because we just gave an opportunity. We asked a question and they were willing to talk.
So I'm hearing the foundation of a movement that needs to happen. and that is bringing back story time to families as tradition. When you sit around and there are different generations of people in the room, that it doesn't always have to be music, and I love music. That sometimes we need to sit down and listen to the stories, and go to the family reunion and
Mhm.
make it for that purpose.
Yeah.
Uh,
Being deliberate with it, just making space for it. It doesn't have to take all day. Just schedule it. We're going to talk for 2 hours. We just
yes,
come on and sit in here and we'll just talk to each other. And it usually ends up extending because it's fun. And the kids
yes,
love to know things about, I mean, you got to get them at the right age to get them into it. But even after they become teenagers and they're drawing back, there are ways to pull them in, you know. There are ways to pull them in. Even if it's
absolutely.
over games or cards.
Hmm. Absolutely. And we see that in Lin Manuel, who brought his culture to bear, in Hamilton, and they're able to tell the story. Somebody who makes history come alive.
Mhm.
Dr. Efua, it could not have been easy to be a professor teaching African American studies at a predominantly white institution. What is that experience like from you? We know we can't go certain places. We can't say everything, and we can't get into the nitty gritty. But what keeps you motivated? What keeps you inspired to keep going despite some of the obstacles we can only imagine? You don't have to share the obstacles. You don't have to describe them. But what keeps you moving? What keeps you going?
Well, I have taught both at HBCUs and at PWIs, and they each
Mhm.
come with their own set of challenges.
Yes, agreed. Yes, that part.
And they're different. They're different challenges. What I've found is that students find their teachers. And so I remember when I first went to my first job at a PWI, which was I had
Mhm.
been teaching at Bowie State for 4 years, and before that I was at Hampton for about 10 years. So this was my first experience at a PWI, and they were telling me about the how I'd have to couch the titles, like be very
Yeah.
don't name the class what it is, name it something so that you can trick the kids into the class. And I wasn't doing that.
Hmm.
I was going to, I'm not trying to manipulate anybody. I'm going to teach what I teach and how I teach it. And I still do. I haven't changed. I haven't changed.
Yeah.
I try to, this is what I do. So when I meet a student who's resistant, I
Hmm.
try to direct my focus to what their needs are. And it's not usually about the subject. It's not usually about whatever they're giving me. It's usually
Hmm.
about something else. I remember one student in particular who was really, and I had a visitor that day. And this student was challenging me very openly and very
Hmm.
respectfully. And so after class, I acted like I didn't even notice. I just kept it moving. But then after class, I said, "Can I speak to you for a minute? Can you walk with me to my office?" And so she was walking with me. I said, "You seem so tired. Did you get rest last night?"
Mm.
And then she was like, "No."
Mm.
And I was like, I'm not asking to be in your business. I'm just asking, is there anything I can do to help?
Hmm.
I went to that level. And then she began to, bit by bit, start to tell me what was actually going on with her. It had nothing
Right.
with all of the things she was challenging me and confronting me and she was not open to the subject that I was teaching, but she had to take the class and I knew it. Everybody knew it.
Right. Right.
Reality
Right.
was she was also overworked. She had too many jobs. Her mother was sick. It was all this stuff going on at home and in her life that made her frustrated and angry, and she directed it at me. And for the most part, that's the way I choose to confront many of the obstacles that get presented. I look at the
Mm,
and I'm like, who are you? Why are you expressing yourself in this way? And I look for the trauma. I look for the trauma. I'm like, there's trauma here, and it has nothing to do with me.
that is such an important tool and something to think about because too often in our systems, we want to shut down a child because of the discipline issues and, suspensions and all of that, when it's really something behind it. There's something that is deeper that is going on. I'm so happy that you reacted to her in that way, and was able to meet her where she was, you know,
Yeah,
to meet
years
her.
later, we're Facebook friends, and she posted on Facebook. They had some question going around, what teachers most impacted your life? And she posted it. She tagged me. She said, I had two teachers, and she tagged me and one other person. She's like, she changed my life. Now, granted, I remember this, all of this, and I remember but I did not think it was that significant.
Hmm.
So she's posting some years later on Facebook saying, "Oh, this woman changed. I didn't think I changed her life."
Well, it's nice to know that you made that impact, though. It's nice to know because in that moment, she felt seen.
Yeah,
In that moment, she felt heard.
yeah. And I
And
think
she,
that's what people want. Even when we're talking about all of this stuff that we got going on, I think the reality is for some time, some segment of our significant segment of our population does not feel seen. They do not feel heard. They're looking for an enemy. And some people are convenient enemies.
yeah. And then it snowballs and it becomes larger than it needs to be instead of addressing the core thing. I guess we need to have some trauma sessions, therapies. We
Something.
need everything in the toolbox.
You might need some oil to throw around
Yes,
or
the
something,
anointed oil
and break some
and some
strongholds
sage.
and some sage, right? I'm telling you, we need something going on.
Yes, and we definitely need some prayer. So, as we close out our conversation, I would like to ask you who made an impact on you? You're making an impact in all these people's lives, and you're writing books, self-discovery, as well as being a mirror and a window for others to see how to connect in community. Who made an impact in your life?
Well, I have to say, I've been writing, I told you for 10 years, I've been working on this book, and now I'm getting toward the end of it. And in this moment, I get to just write off the top of my head. I don't have to think about structure. I don't have to think about outlines or chapters. I'm just writing things that come to mind. And what comes to mind always for me now are the women, my mother,
Mm,
my grandmother, and the women they gathered around themselves who were like, I didn't have an actual natural aunt. My mother had brothers, my father had brothers. I didn't have a biological aunt, but I had all of these women that they had gathered around themselves who were like aunts and like mothers, and they poured into me. They just poured into me.
yes.
And those were the ones, I mean, and my mother in particular, when it comes to writing, every time I picked up a book as a little girl, it was often. And then every time she saw me with a book in my hand, she would say, somebody wrote that.
Mm-hmm.
Every time I picked up a book, somebody wrote that. And so
Mm-hmm.
I blame her. And my father was always telling stories. So between the two of them, I couldn't help myself.
Yes. And we can recognize it. I know that when I was a little girl, I used to have those marble notebooks and
Mm,
I would scribble in it before I knew how to form my letters. And I'm like, somebody's got to be a writer someday."
got it. That's right.
Absolutely. So that is how the wisdom of one generation passing down to another generation can be so impactful. So
Yeah.
I want to thank you again, Dr. Afu. Just thank you so much for being here as my guest. Once again, the book is called Kin. She has 4 books, by the way. You have to wind back and get the names of all 4 books. But Kin is one of the most recent, and it has some lovely artwork by your daughter. And it is an amazing journey through. I was just struck by the different literary devices. It was like I was going, on a wave in terms of in and out. Okay, okay, now we here, now we going over there. And it was just a fantastic journey. So I thank you for putting that out into the world. Okay. How do people get in touch with you? How do they find you?
Well, I have a website, V Efua
Mhm.
Prince, and I'm on Facebook under the same name and LinkedIn.
Okay. And Afua is EFUA, correct?
Correct. V Efua, EFUA, Prince.
V Afua. Okay, Prince. Thank you so much for that. So this is Anne Marie Maloney. I am host of About This Life, where we are changing our lives one day at a time. And before I sign off, and this is because things pop into my head at the last moment, is that, the show is about changing mindsets, right? It's about letting go of beliefs. And it's important to know that some of the things, the mindsets we have to really look at is some people will question, well, why do we need to still read when we have AI, when we have technology at our fingertips? We still need to read because we still need to know the stories, the narratives. Otherwise, they will get lost. And if we depend on AI all the time, they become artificial. They're not real. We still need the literature because it's those images and thoughts and ideas that connects us to community and to culture. So literature really is at the heartbeat of our interconnectedness. And that is why reading is so important. Go ahead, LeVar Burton in me from the Reading Rainbow. Like, we need to read because we need to be able to say who tells our stories. So, Anne Marie, host of About This Life. Take care, everybody.